The views and opinions expressed on the Cap are those of the hosts. They do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of OldMilk Media. Any opinions stated aren't intended to offend anyone.
On this episode of the Cap Podcast, we react to Hood Poet by Polo G. Welcome back. This is episode 515 of your critical but accurate tour through Hip Hop The Cat Podcast. I'm Nate Sperlin. Taylor's off this week. Thank you for watching on YouTube, listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever else you might be tuning in. Feel free to support this video by liking this video, subscribing to the channel, follow OldMilk on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok at OldMilk Media. That being said, we are going to get right into it. Once again, we are talking about Hood Poet by Polo G. This album is 18 tracks, 15 minutes long, featuring G Herbo, 42 Doug, Friday, Offset, Lil Durk, The Kid Leroy, Huncho, Glorilla, and Future. That being said, let's get into the reaction. First, I want to talk about my expectations here. So this is Polo G's first album since 2021. The album that was dropped in 2021 was Hall of Fame. This album, Hood Poet, was originally supposed to come out last year, but there's been like a whole whirlwind of like events going on around Polo G. So for whatever reason, this album was postponed indefinitely, and now it came out this year. Today, I'm recording on Friday. So yeah, so my first expectation really is I want to see how Polo G is able to update his sound in 2024. Also, there's been a lot of things happening with Polo G, as I just referenced, over the past 3 years, distracting and derailing him from what seemed to be an upward trajectory for his career. So I'd like to see him be more vulnerable, or I'd like to see he's always been vulnerable, but I'd like to see him be vulnerable on this album particularly, because there have been so many fans waiting for music from Polo G over the past 3 years, and now we finally get this album, and fans want to know why have they been waiting so long. Additionally, another reason why I'm expecting there to be some vulnerability on this album is because Hood Poet is actually an acronym that stands for He Overcame Obstacles During Pain or Emotional Trauma. So I'm expecting Polo G to touch on that a little bit as well. Originally, this album was also supposed to be a collab album with Southside, and for whatever reason, this album is not a collab album with Southside anymore, although some of the Southside beats are still here, and we'll get into that once we get into the actual song-by-song reactions. But also, my last expectation is I expect Polo G to be able to regain and build off the momentum from Hall of Fame, and particularly Hall of Fame, the Deluxe. Hall of Fame 2.0 is what it was called. I feel like Hall of Fame 2.0 was such a great deluxe, and arguably, in my opinion at least, it was better than the original Hall of Fame. So to end off 2021 on that strong note, and to basically disappear for, like I just said, 3 years, it's kind of weird. So interesting to see if Polo G, excuse me, will be able to recreate and re-establish himself as one of the more promising rappers coming up. All right, let's talk about the packaging. So I think I like this album. I like the album cover. I think that the album cover, like if you look at the GOAT, if you look at Hall of Fame, if you look at Hall of Fame 2.0, and then you look at this cover for Hood Poet, I think they all kind of fall in line with each other. So I like that. So it's nice to see that still being able to be carried on, even though there was a gap in between the last two albums, this album and the last album. So let me talk about my first thoughts. It sounds like, at least on the beginning of the album, it kind of sounded like Polo G. Like Polo G just sounded weird. Like the mixing of it all was kind of weird. I think that Polo G might have benefited from doing some features with other rappers before this album came out, just to increase the hype on this album. I don't really see much hype around it, besides like looking at like a few Reddit posts and a few select things on Twitter. But besides that, it's not the collective hype that used to exist for a Polo G album. So I think that doing some features would have helped that. Also, there isn't as much luster on this album as previous albums as well. And I'll get into why I feel that way. I think that a lot of the beats leave a lot to be desired. Some of them kind of feel unfinished, if I'm being honest, particularly the ones where I see the Southside credit on it. It feels like to me that they had a vision and an idea for a project, and what we just heard, at least with the Southside production, is the bare bones of that. It doesn't really feel like, once again, it doesn't really feel like these beats are complete. It kind of feels like there's too many things going on. Some things need to be taken out. Also, the mixing on those songs as well doesn't really seem as clear. So I'm yeah, like it's just a whole bunch of like it's kind of like a hodgepodge, like kind of at least the first half of it. The second half I feel like is much better. Um and with that, also now I'm wondering like when these songs were made. I talked about earlier how I wanted Polo G to be able to update his sound for 2024. And now with these songs kind of sounding a little bit dated, I don't really know when these songs were made, and because of that, that's kind of concerning to me overall. I think that Polo G's bread and butter is the melodic rap, where he's kind of split like right in the center between being melodic and rapping. I think that's his bread and butter. He gets to that a little bit here. I would have liked to hear that kind of flow, that kind of lane a little bit more. And finally, before we get into the song by song, the track listing, in my opinion, is kind of all over the place, at least for the first half. Like it seems like there's a effort to go melodic, then trap, then melodic, then trap. But that's kind of weird because those two sounds don't really mesh as well. So because of that, like one song isn't able to capitalize off of the momentum that the previous song was able to gain, because of the fact that they don't really sound alike. And because of that, it's like you're restarting from ground zero. I don't really have a comparison for that. But yeah, like it's just like you're resetting the clock every song versus like setting the clock at the beginning and having like a build up throughout. So that was interesting to me. I do think towards the second half, I think first of all, I think the second half is much better than the first half. And because of that, and that's mainly because of the fact that track 10 to track 18, those are the tracks where they start building off of each other. That's where we start getting melodic Polo G. And I think that, like I just said, that's his bread and butter. But also, additionally to that, I think that also, like I said, it allows each song to build off the next, and it makes me more excited to hear the next song, knowing there's more of a logic to the track listing, at least on the second half. So now let's get into the song by song here. The first song I want to talk about is God's Favorite. That's the intro. It's like a grand opening. There's like a lot of moving parts. It might be too many moving parts. The quality of the mix, honestly, I'm not a fan of that mix at all. Polo G at times, especially over like that rock guitar that we first hear, it kind of sounds like um it's hard to hear him really. And again, it just sounds like the mixing just isn't fully there. No Recruits, I feel the same way. I think that song needs a hook. Also the mixing, like I just said, just feels weird. Other than that, it's a very solid song. Um, Barely holding on is where we first get a taste of Polo G, the melodic Polo G. But that song leaves something to be desired as well. Same Me also leaves something to be desired. I do like the fact that you have Polo G and Friday being able to sing about similar things. It kind of shows chemistry between them. I think that's a really good thing. Um, Thorns is really the first song where I really had like a real thought, and I really started breaking it down, because the songs before them, again, it's just the mixing on it was kind of weird, and it's just not something that I feel like I'm gonna go back to. Not something that was really pleasant for my ears. So yeah, I'm just gonna skip that and go to the songs that I really like, or the songs that I do plan on listening to again, which one definitely is Thorns. Thus far, when we look at Thorns is track 7. So we have 6 tracks before Thorns, and I wrote down that Thorns makes is the most it makes me feel the most like Polo G used to make me feel, specifically, excuse me, Hall of Fame 2.0. Polo G's rapping about a relationship, and it seems like that relationship is nearing an end. And we also get that nice Polo G where split down the middle, where you have the melodic rapping that we really enjoy from Polo G. The beat also takes a nice step back. This is really the start of where we start getting beats that aren't trying to do too much. And I think because of the beats not trying to do too much, I think that allows this project to flourish, that allows Polo G to flourish on those songs where the beats are just doing the thing that it's supposed to do, which is keep the tempo of the song. So Polo G knows how to rap. So that was my favorite track at that point. We're gonna get to favorite tracks later, but I don't believe this track made my favorite tracks. Yeah, it did not. Anyway, moving on to the next one, we have G63, and that track honestly is just straight up weird. We get 22 seconds of this like ominous sound, and the beat all comes together at once. It's like literally a 0 to 100 type thing. I'm not really as big a fan of that. I do like Offset on it. I like Polo G's verse as well. I think that Offset's flow just like perfectly complements the beat. One thing that Offset knows how to do is he knows how to rap on beat, and he does a really good job of that. Polo G does a good job of that as well. And that's really the start of my joy from this album starting. So then we move on to We a Shoot, and that's featuring Lil Durk. I'm not really as big of a fan of this song. It kind of feels like Polo G is rushing. Kind of, it just feels like it's all slapped together. It doesn't really feel cohesive at all. And the mixing, once again, we have that problem again. The mixing just kind of sounds weird. So it's not really my type of thing. I'm sure some people out there would like it, but it's not for me. But the first track that really, really starts to remind me of the reasons why I like Polo G is Distraction. And that's also the lead single for Hood Poet. The mixing, first of all, sounds so much better. It sounds so much better. You take Distraction and then you take God's Favorite and you compare the mixing between the two, and it's kind of like night and day. So off that alone, one of my favorite tracks. But additionally, I would say that Distraction is also the floor of my expectations for Polo G. It's a good mixing, a mastery of the tempo. He's not trying to do too much with his voice also. Sometimes like when he's rapping on these aggressive songs, you kind of hear him trying to put more bass into his voice, and I'm not really a fan of that either. I feel like just rap how you normally rap, and it's just like with the bass being in his voice, it kind of limits him on the flows and the tempos he's able to hit when he's rapping. So definitely like I said, I'm gonna keep saying it over and over again. Definitely more of a fan of a melodic Polo G here. So if you like the aggressive stuff more and you disagree with me about the fact that his bass, like when he puts the bass in his voice, it sounds like he's kind of like not he's kind of limited, then I guess take everything that I'm saying from this review and just like flip it around. But yeah, Distraction, like that. I like that he is melodic over the beat. It also sounds like he's more comfortable also. So maybe Polo G agrees with me. But he has so many lanes that he has to fill. He has to make those songs. But anyway, moving on to No Turning Back. Nice build up on that song. I that's another thing too. I think the first half there are a lot of tracks where they kind of just like the track starts and then they slap you with what it's gonna be. Like there's no build up really. There's no anticipation that's allowed to be had. And I feel like on No Turning Back we get a nice build up. And Polo G, he's taking his time with his melody on this track. I like that. And that really helps the listenability of this track. This is definitely one of the tracks I'm definitely going to be going back to. And Huncho being able to compliment Polo G and being able to basically, yeah, like he matched Polo G's melody. And I mean, the chemistry between these two artists, I really appreciated hearing that. Definitely a song that I will listen to again. Angels in the Sky, once again, we get that nice build up that raises the anticipation for the verses. Once again, Polo G, like he's taking his time with his flow. I like there's a few extra things that go on this song. And at the end of the first verse, there's like a nice little echo that closes out the verse. As Polo G raps his last word of the first verse, there's like a nice little echo, and then that is provides a nice transition into the hook, which I really liked. And then in the second verse, like midway through the second verse, there becomes like it's like a demonic type of voice modulation that goes on there, and that lasts. Well, it starts from the first half, excuse me, the second half of the second verse, and it finishes the verse, and that goes down so much better because the beat is once again isn't trying to do too much, and the beat is just doing what it's supposed to do, which is keeping the tempo of the song. So, yeah, I think that Polo G did a really good job on Angels in the Sky. Next up, let's talk Dark Side. That's another one of my favorite tracks, or one of the tracks I'm going to be listening to again. And once again, like we have good mixing, we have a better tempo. This track, Polo G, is more aggressive than the previous ones that I just talked about. But still, with that, he's able to maintain the principles of understanding tempo and allowing for a good, well, I don't think he's doing the mixing, but whoever's doing the mixing did a good job here. Also, this track, Dark Side, was recorded in 2020, and you can really tell because that track kind of it mirrors my floor expectations for Polo G1, because it's 2020 and that's really when Polo G was starting to develop. So this being recorded in 2020 is basically a microcosm of what I'm expecting from Polo G, minus the fact that there could be a little bit more melody on this. But the mixing, being able to stay on beat, being able to stay on tempo without sounding like you're rushing, without sounding like you're trying to force things. I think that this is really what I'm looking for from Polo G. And Dark Side is a great example of that. It being recorded in 2020, like I just said, shows once again. This is really this is the form that we're expecting from Polo G. And hopefully he's able to continue that, which he does throughout this album. But it would have been nice if the whole album kind of had this level of competence, if you will. All right, now I like the chemistry between Glorilla and Polo G on Bad Kids. Also we get a nice tempo piano beat. I like that they're trading verses back and forth. That's just great. I'm always gonna be a fan of artists trading verses back and forth. Survival of the Fittest. It sounds like another return to 2020. That winning formula of picking the minimal beats and allowing the flow to just be the lyrics to shine. Like that's the winning formula for Polo G, and Survival of the Fittest is a good example of that. And it also leaves versatility for melody as well. And we're able to see that when Future comes on. Future's verse is a little bit more melodic, but it still works. Also, it's Future. It's always going to work because it's Future. And now the transition between Survival of the Fittest to Father's Day is really, really nice. Father's Day is a really, really good song. First of all, the kids choir on that, great. This is a sentimental track. Polo G's talking about the fact that he had his dad in his life. And he's rapping about that, and he's being appreciative of that. So really sentimental track. I think that the end, we get a snippet of what seems to be Polo G and his dad reminiscing about their old times and stuff like that. So I think that snippet, along with the message of the song, along with the children's choir, I think that all just like brings it about to like peak sentimentalness, if you will. So that's definitely one of the more important songs I would say on the album. And it's a nice lead into the final track. It's a nice penultimate track. And From the Heart is the last track. That's the outro track. And that's where Polo G kind of closes it out. He's talking about like his rags to riches story. And he also gives fans a slice of like the current life that he's living. So yeah, that's basically the highlights. I'd say the highlights and the lowlights of Hood Poet. Playback value. Objectively, I think that this will go for 2 weeks. I think that if Polo G was able to get on some features and have some hype coming into this album, or some more hype coming into this album, then this album would go further. But I'm really, really unsure of how far this album will go past 2 weeks, just because it doesn't really seem like many people are talking about it. But yeah, and subjectively for me, I don't in full, if I'm listening to this album in full, I'm not doing this again. There are a lot of songs that I like on this album. And I'm just gonna take those songs and listen to those over and over again. And the ones that I don't like will never get another listen from me. So yeah, let's get to final thoughts. My last thought is Polo G survives a rocky start to successfully land the plane by reminding fans who have been waiting for 3 years of the signature sound that made them committed to his music. My top 3 tracks: number 3, Bad Kids; number 2, Angels in the Sky; and number 1, Distraction. All right. Thank you for tuning into episode 515 of the Cat Podcast. Don't forget to leave your opinion of Hood Poet by Polo G in the comments below. If you've enjoyed this episode, feel free to like this video, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, follow Old Milk on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok at Old Milk Media. Check out oldmilk.co for more information. I'm Nate Sperlin, and I will be back in next episode, because next episode I'm talking about Lotto's new album, Sugar Honey Iced Tea. So stay tuned. Thank you for watching. I am out.